Welcome to Beyond the Coverage, brought to you by Moss Adams. I'm Chris Horner, and this is the first rest day of the 2021 Tour de France. It's been a spectacular 9 days of racing.
Are you not entertained?
At this year's Tour de France, and I think we got some more good stages left. Solid stages. Mark Cavendish trying to break Eddie Merckx's record. Sagan still hasn't won a stage. Michael Matthews is trying to win stage. Sonny Colbrelli was fabulous at yesterday, gaining green jersey points on Mark Cavendish, so we know he's interested in going for the green jersey and trying to dislodge Mark Cavendish, but he's still got to jump in front of Michael Matthews, who we saw doing some action on yesterday's first green jersey sprint points on the stage. Now, Tadej Pogačar, he's been fabulous. His UAE Team Emirates looked excellent yesterday. I want to break down his teammate Brandon Mcnulty's crash. When he comes out of the turn, we'll see him swing out of the turn. He looks back to see where his teammates are. Fantastic tactic, especially if you're in the rain, to make sure your teammates are always safe when you're coming out of the corner, so you're not just gapping them up. So he'll look back and he'll drift to the left. Now, the drift to the left, we all do it. It happens. It's the way it is, even at the pro levels. A little bit less at the pro levels than at amateur rides and, of course, your normal Saturday group ride, but we still do it. Brandon does it, no big deal. The next problem is, after he looks straight, his bike clearly is pointed to the left and it's getting ready to go off the road. The next mistake he makes, and this is why I'm bringing it up, because maybe it can help you guys at home when you're doing your group rides or you're riding on your own. You turn the bike by putting pressure on the right side will get you the bike to go right. Now, Brandon McNulty's going left. And the problem he has, aside from when he looked left and drifted that way, he lifted his right hand off the handlebars, and that takes pressure off the right side of the bike, adds pressure to the left. He's already leaning on the left side, and so it's very difficult to get the bike, especially in the rain and wet, cold weather with fingers freezing. It's very difficult to get the bike to turn right if you only have your left hand on the handlebars. If he could get his right back on there, he could put pressure on that right side of the bars, and that'll easily get the bike to turn quickly. We see that technique all the time with Julian Alaphilippe when he's just tearing up the descents. You'll see him just putting pressure on different sides of the handlebar to go right and left. So when Brandon McNulty lifts his right hand up, he's basically eliminated any chance to pull himself out of that left direction that he's fading as he's going off the road. He realizes it once his hand's off that there's no way he can reposition his hand in time, so you see him shove it back into the handlebar and try to grab the back brake, but it's too late. He's already off the road with the slippery, wet grass there. There's no chance he's going to pull it out, and he crashes. So keep in mind, when you're in a situation where you have to turn the bike aggressively, you have to have both hands on that bar, especially the one that is going to change the direction of the bike quickly. So those two mistakes, looking back, veering to the left, and then when he took his right hand off, that just eliminated any chance he had. He crashes there, but as we already talked about in the butterfly effect yesterday, UAE Team Emirates were in a great position, didn't have to wait with him, so Tadej Pogačar just kept riding his team on the front. Now, let's break down some of the dangerous stages coming up and what to expect. Because UAE Team Emirates, Tadej Pogačar, he looks in fabulous position on the general classification with only Ben O'Connor 2 minutes and then everyone else way back on the general classification. And we're talking Rigoberto Urán, Carapaz, those are his big favorites in my book to be attacking him later. But Tadej Pogačar is amazing in the big mountains. We all know that. His only weakness, if you want to call it that, is going to be on the flat stages, because as the mountains come down, the level of everybody else's fitness and ability to go fast and put them in dangerous circumstances at this year's Tour de France will come up. As the road gets flatter, the level of the riders come up and they're more even. So Tadej Pogačar's most dangerous stages, of course, are going to be the flat stages that have crosswinds and cause problems. The big problem, though, for the general classification is the next 5 stages, there's 3 of those. 2 of them, stage 10 and 12, are ideal for the Killer B teams. And I'm talking Bora Hansgrohe, Bike Exchange, and Bahrain Victorious. These are 2 stages where Cavendish could possibly come off the back And if Cavendish was to get separated from the front group, those three teams will probably ride at the front together to keep the Kunit Quick-Step team from getting Cavendish back on. If we see that, we know UAE Team Emirates have a free ride all the way to the finish on tomorrow's stage 10 and on stage 12. Now, stage 11 is a very dangerous stage for UAE Team Emirates, and that's because the first 75 kilometers are more or less flat. So like I said, now Tadej Pogačar, UAE Team Emirates have come down, and everybody else in the field is come up. So they're all on level playing fields. So if Tadej Pogačar should happen to miss an important move, let's say, we'll call it Richard Carapaz, was to get in the front group, and he's going to need a bunch of teammates with him in that front group, that is a dangerous moment in the crosswind section. So if UAE Team Emirates cannot look after Tadej Pogačar and it's windy and crosswinds and there's a split on stage 11 before Mont Ventoux starts proper, Tadej Pogačar could be in a dangerous circumstance. Probably the biggest, riskiest stage, I think, for UAE Team Emirates in this next week is going to be that Ventoux stage. They have to be careful if there's wind. If there's no wind, it's probably not that dangerous of a stage because any break that gets up the road, remember, there's in the top 12 in general classification, there's a different team holding every position. And now we're at the Tour de France. Okay, AG2R with Ben O'Connor's in second on the general classification, and AG2R would love to have him finish on the podium. Every day he stays in the top three, AG2R are getting press and exposure, and great press and exposure in France because they're a French team. So don't think it's strange if you see AG2R riding at any point in time between these next stage 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. If Ben O'Connor has good legs, we'll definitely see AG2R riding. If there's a big split on stage 10 and 12, you know it's the Killer B teams up there driving it, and Mark Cavendish has probably gotten dropped. So look for that. Stage 13, great stage for Mark Cavendish to add to his win tally at the Tour de France and start to creep up to the legendary Eddy Merckx' 34 stage wins. 13 looks ideal for a sprint for Mark Cavendish, and honestly, 10 and 12 are good, but it's questionable whether or not if he can make it over those climbs if we're talking three teams up front are just absolutely driving it. 14 and 15, we get back into the big mountains, and so UAE Team Emirates just need to get Tadej Pogačar near or hopefully on the final climb of those stages if they want to keep him solid in position at this year's Tour de France. And expect many different tactics. Anytime you see a team riding the front that looks strange to you, go down the general classification, especially the top 10, because they're all different teams. So if a team's riding the front and it's not UAE Team Emirates, you got to look down the general classification and see if they're just trying to protect their top 10 on general classification position. So UAE Team Emirates in a fabulous spot. Honestly, Tadej Pogačar riding absolutely amazing. It's going to be a crosswind stage or a crash or a flat or some kind of mishap that'll cost him losing this year's Tour de France or some kind of sickness coming up in my book. I mean, he just looks absolutely fabulous. But it can happen. We are at the Tour de France. We already seen with Primož Roglič going down in a crash. Geraint Thomas went down in a crash. There's no reason why Tadej Pogačar couldn't go down in a crash, have a flat, a mishap. His team has him in a bad position in the crosswind stage, something like that. Otherwise, he looks fabulous for this next week of racing. Mark Cavendish has at least one, if not two or three chances to extend on his race tally of wins here at this year's Tour de France. And stage 10 and 12 are absolutely fabulous for the three Killer Bees, Bahrain Victorious, Bike Exchange, and Bora Hansgrohe to light things up and make it an incredibly exciting stage on tomorrow's stage 10 for sure. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys real soon.